today I'm going to be talking about all the books I read in the month of October. If you cannot tell, these are ghosties. I think you can tell, but I just wanted you to know. The lighting, they might look a little bit like white blobs, but they are ghosts and I love them. And I love this shirt. It's like my favorite Halloween shirt. Just needed you to appreciate all the vibes to wrap up October. As always, we're going from least favorite to most favorite, starting with the books that I DNF'd. I DNF'd 2 books this month, and both of them might be kind of shocking. The first one I mentioned in a reading vlog I was doing, and that is Vampires of El Norte by Isabel Cañas. I was reading this on the reading vlog that I did where ChatGPT controlled my reading vlog. If you missed that, that was a really fun one where I went to ChatGPT, which is an AI robot chatbot little service, and I asked it to craft a reading vlog for me, to pick books off of my TBR, to figure out how to put the reading vlog all together. And this is one of the books that they selected for me to read in that reading vlog, but I ended up DNFing it about 100 pages into the story. I thought the writing was actually really good. I think the author is very talented and does a really great job of building a scene and building characters and building atmosphere and tone, but stylistically, genre-ly, topically, this book was just not really something that I was drawn to. It is much more of a historical book with a romance at the center of it. It does also have horror elements. There are vampires in it, but it just wasn't something that I was feeling a lot of energy to pick up, and I ended up setting it down. The other one that I DNF'd this month, I would say I'm ashamed, but I'm not, and that is Frankenstein. I've been saying for years I wanted to read Frankenstein, and I'm always like, I'll read it in October, and if I don't read it this October, unsubscribe from my channel, because how have I not read Frankenstein yet? Like, I've owned it for years, I'm gonna read it. And I did try. I was even going to film a dedicated reading vlog to this book. I started the vlog, I was giving updates, and then I just said, you know what? Why suffer? Why suffer? I don't get paid that much to be here. This isn't a job, this is for fun. And I was not having fun reading Frankenstein, which is really surprising because I've seen like everyone who has ever read Frankenstein seems to really like it, but I just was not vibing with it. I wasn't vibing with the writing style. I wasn't getting that interested in the story. And so I did end up reading full spoilers for what happens in the story. And now at least I know what happens in Frankenstein, and that gives me some peace. But yeah, this one just didn't end up being for me. Next, we have my singular 1-star book of the month, and that is To Be Devoured by Sarah Tantlinger. If you do not know, I host a bi-monthly read-a-thon on my channel that is called the 24-hour horror-a-thon. It is a 24-hour read-a-thon that we do where we read horror books, we watch horror books, we chat about what we're reading and watching, we have a fun time. In October, I did a special edition where instead of just doing one 24-hour block with one book and one movie, we did 4 6-hour blocks on Friday nights with 4 books and 4 movies. And it was so much fun. I really enjoyed doing it that way and getting to consume a lot more content all through the month of October. This was one of our selections though, and I hated it. This was the most unsuccessful 24-hour horror-a-thon pick I've had so far. Usually I tend to enjoy them quite a bit. We've gotten really lucky with the ones that we've gotten. This one I've seen get really good ratings from people I know and people who I tend to share opinions with, but it just did not work for me. This is a story where you're following a woman named Andy who is just spiraling into madness. She is like obsessed with this concept of, what do the vultures know? Like, they're eating all this carrion. What does flesh taste like? I must know. Simultaneously going through issues in her relationship and talking a lot with her therapist. I kind of saw where it was going in some parts. Other things surprised me, but the whole time I just didn't feel like it was a very successful story. I didn't really feel like it was communicating a lot to me. I didn't connect with the characters. I didn't connect with the writing. It was just all around not a good time for me. However, I've seen a lot of people really like it and think it has a powerful message, so make your own choices there. Next up is a 2-star. I'm pretty bummed about this 2-star because I really wanted to love this book, but that is Walking Practice by Dolki Min, which is translated by Victoria Caudle. In this story, you are following an alien who has made it to Earth, and they are shape-shifting through life. They're able to like sometimes be this person, sometimes be another person. They eat people to then become people, and they are navigating life and what it is to be a human. They also typically struggle to walk. They're learning to walk, hence the title Walking Practice. And I thought this book had some really great things about it, But all in all, it just wasn't a super satisfying read for me by the end. The character is really interesting. The voice is really interesting, which is especially interesting because it's a translated work. And I think the translator just must have done a really great job translating because it keeps such a stark voice alive with this main character who is this alien creature who is understanding humanity from a different perspective. And they're kind of snarky and funny and witty. And I just thought that was done really well. But altogether, I just didn't feel like there was enough plot. I wanted more from it. I just didn't walk away feeling super satisfied from it, which is a super bummer because I've been looking out for this book all year. I really wanted to pick it up. I love the cover, but it just did not work out for me. Next up, another 2-star is The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. This was another one of our buddy reads for the 24-hour horror-a-thon, and this is a story about a mermaid who is going on this journey with this person who is wearing a plague mask, as you can see on the cover. And they're just going through this journey, running away kind of from the previous kingdom she was in after a disaster has kind of happened. And they encounter some new people and a new village where there's some weird stuff going on with the people who live there. It is very brief. It goes by very quickly. And again, this one just did not feel super satisfying to me. I think it had a very interesting concept. I think it had a lot of potential with all of these weird ingredients coming together, but I just didn't feel like it did what I wanted it to do. Also, the prose, the writing in here was very distracting for me. I have read from Cassandra Khaw before. I read Nothing But Black and Teeth, which I know many people that I look out for their opinions on, like many people in my sphere, did not really enjoy that book, and a lot of the complaints about it were around the writing style, but I liked that book, and so I thought maybe I'll like this one too, because I didn't seem to have a problem with those things in Nothing But Black and Teeth, but pretty much everything that I heard people have a problem with Nothing But Black and Teeth, I felt the same with this book. So I think if you've already read that one and you didn't enjoy it, I don't think this one's going to be any more successful for you, unfortunately, because in this one, I was like, wow, there's a $5 word in like every sentence, and that is pretty distracting. I also found myself having a lot of moments where I was just kind of confused about what was going on in general, where I don't think the scenes flowed together super well. I didn't feel like the story was coming together super well, and it just left me hanging a little bit. But what I did like about it was the vibes. I thought the vibes were really cool. It kind of reminded me of a Shauna Maguire Wayward Children series novella in a couple different ways. The way this book is like angled and what it's supposed to be about, which I didn't feel like was super clearly communicated throughout the story, is like an after 15 years happens kind of view of what would happen if Ariel, the Little Mermaid, did end up marrying Prince Eric, but then things went really wrong. I saw someone describe it as a carnivorous Little Mermaid and Frankenstein's monster who is curiously gussied up as a plague doctor. And I think that's spot on, and that sets up such an interesting concept for it, such an interesting vibe, but I didn't feel like it really went where it needed to go. So I'm not giving up on Cassandra Khaw yet. I would still read more from them in the future, but this one unfortunately just was not a success for me. Next up is a random little book that I read called The Only Living Girl on Earth by Charles Yu. I think this is a Scribd exclusive or Scribd original story that was published on Scribd. I read it on Scribd as an ebook. It's very, very short. I read it just in one sitting. I was like trying to kill 40 minutes to wait for midnight so that 1989 Taylor's version would drop and I could listen to the vault tracks, and I was just trying to stay awake. And I was like, I can read this in 40 minutes. I've always kind of looked at this book. Let me just fly through it really quick. I ended up giving it a 3-star. I felt like it was fine. The concept for this one is that you're following the only living girl left on Earth. Earth has kind of been going through different phases very far in the future where it's becoming like a tourist attraction for other people in the galactic system. They come back and now it's like a museum, but it's been like an amusement park before. And it's just kind of like a weird dystopian sci-fi jump in the future kind of story. It's memorable to me in those ways because it just felt very original in its voice and its concept. I thought it had a really strong voice. I liked the writing style. The character and their situation was very interesting and what they were doing with Earth. But the story overall, not super memorable for me. It's really short. I mean, it's just like reading something between a short story, like a longer short story or a very brief novella, somewhere in between that. And it was a fine way to pass the time, but it in itself does not really stand out to me. I remember there were some like interludes that were written a little bit differently, but I can't even really remember how those were structured or what the point of them was. But I remember during those pieces, that was what I was less interested in. But I did walk away from the book and look to see what else the author has written written. I would read more from them in the future. Nothing else really stuck out to me on their backlist, but I don't know. I'd keep an eye out for more from them. Next is The Vessel by Adam Neville. This was another one of my 24-hour horror-a-thon buddy reads this month, and I ended up giving this a 3-star. In this story, you are following a woman who is an in-home caretaker, and she is going to take care of this older woman. Like I said, I give it a 3-star. I thought it was fine. I liked it. I just didn't love it. It is a little bit of an experimental or different kind of book, but not in a way that you're probably going to notice right away. The whole time I was reading it, I'm like, something feels like a little bit off here, but I can't quite put my finger on what it is. And I kept thinking that it felt like a movie and not really like a book. And then I got to the end where there's this really long author's note, which made all of that make sense to me. I don't know a lot about Adam Neville. I'm pretty sure this is the first thing that I've read from him, but he seems to have written a lot of things. And in the author's note, he was talking about how he was writing this after The Ritual got adapted. He wrote the book The Ritual, and that was made into a movie on Netflix, which was our buddy watch for the same weekend that we read this. And I love The Ritual. I've already seen it before. I watched it again and just loved it. 5 stars. Highly recommend the movie. But he said that he took to writing this after that had gotten adapted, and he got really interested in the movie world, and he wanted to see if he could write a screenplay. And so he wrote, I think, Cunning Folk first and then this, but I think he wrote them as screenplays, but then also turned them into novellas. So you're not reading a screenplay here, like you're reading a novella, but I think it was originally a screenplay that he turned into the novella so that it would have some kind of book companion. And when he was writing it, he wanted to write it in a way that kind of reflected a screenplay or reflected a movie, where you don't get inside the characters' heads. You are just seeing everything and you're left to interpret it. And as soon as I read that, I was like, aha, that is exactly what it was. I felt like I couldn't get close to these characters because I wasn't getting inside of their heads. I was just observing them doing all of these things. And so that created this like weird little disconnect that I think is what made me just end up giving it a 3-star. But knowing that, I'm like, that's pretty clever and it was executed pretty well if that's what you're trying to achieve. And I appreciate that more. But I rate on entertainment factor, and my entertainment for this was like a 3 out of 5. I'm definitely going to read more from Adam Neville though. I just really thought the author's note made me appreciate everything more about his writing, the way he thinks about things, and I'm definitely interested to check out more from him. So if you have other recommendations of books of his, definitely let me know down below. Next up is a book that I gave a 3.5-star rating to, and that is All the Sinners Bleed by S.A. Cosby. I will say I had wildly high expectations for this because I feel like I've only seen 5 stars across the board for this all year long. People have been absolutely loving it. I was a little bit hesitant because I have read from S.A. Cosby before. I read Razorblade Tears, and that was another book where people were absolutely loving it, and then I read it, and personally to me it was a 3-star, so I was a little bit nervous, like, oh, is that gonna happen again? And it kind of did. It's such a weird experience when you see a mass of people loving something and then you just don't get that same experience, and you're like, is there something wrong with me? Am I missing something? I don't know. But everybody is seeing or reading that I'm not, but I just did not have like a blown away experience with this. I thought it was great, like it's a great crime fiction book, but to me it wasn't anything special or extraordinary. I just thought it was a good time with good writing, with good characters, but for me, I'm looking for, especially in a mystery, I'm really looking to feel very rooted in it with my characters. I really want to feel like I've got a chance to solve it. And the way this mystery was laid out and then the reveal that ultimately comes, I didn't feel like I really was super involved in solving the mystery with this character. I felt very close to this character because S.A. Cosby does a great job bringing characters to life and putting you inside their head and creating an atmosphere and a tone around them and like bringing you into their world. I felt very, very close with the character, but I didn't feel very close to the mystery. And I want to feel really close to the mystery as well. So I ended up having a 3.5-star experience, but I still thought it was good. You know, I'd still recommend it. I just wasn't personally blown away like many others seem to have been. I forgot to say what this one is about. You're following a guy named Titus who is the first Black sheriff in his small town in Virginia. He was elected a year ago, and then he has this incident come up where there is a school shooting, and it's a whole ordeal where they end up shooting the guy who was actually the shooter, and that opens this big investigation, and Titus starts going into it, figuring out what's going on in the town, and unearths a serial killer along the way. So you're following him as he's trying to understand who the serial killer is in the town. And I didn't actually feel like this felt like mysteries do when you're following like a detective or a sheriff, where they're very actively trying to solve the mystery. It felt like Titus was a little bit of a passive character in the whole mystery that was happening. Like things would happen and then he would have to rush to the scene to find out. It didn't feel like he was being very proactive and trying to investigate things, because he also has a lot going on in his personal life, and it feels like he's dealing with that more than he is like chasing the mystery or like trying to get ahead of the mystery. It's just that he keeps having to react to things that are happening. And that is something I don't love in mysteries. So that might be why I didn't have the best experience with it, because I do know that is a thing that I often don't love when that's happening in a mystery or a thriller. I want a really active character who's like trying to get 2 steps ahead. I don't want to watch someone just reacting to a lot of things. So that was probably why my personal experience was a bit hindered, but I do think S.A. Cosby is a great writer. I think he really develops great characters, great stories, great plots, but again, just did not blow me away. My other 3.5 star read of the month is Last Leave the Room by Caitlin Starling, which I ended up reading in that reading vlog I did where ChatGPT controlled my reading vlog. So if you want to see my full thoughts, full experience, you can check that video out. I'll have it linked down below. This was very kindly sent to me by the publisher and I was very excited to read it. It was my first Caitlin Starling book and it sounded so intriguing. You're following a researcher, Dr. Tamsin Rivers, who is living in the town of San Circo, and they discover that the city is sinking, but they don't know why. And there's some really weird circumstances with how it's sinking, and her basement in particular is sinking faster than any other place in the city. And then one day she's down in her basement and then suddenly there's a door that wasn't there before. And then one day the door opens and a doppelganger of her walks out. Cue the mystery. What's going on? Why is the city sinking? Why is this thing in particular happening to her? It is a weird, speculative book tinged with elements of horror, and I absolutely loved the concept of it. I was pulled in so quickly. I also loved the writing of it. I really liked Caitlin Starling's writing style. It's always a fun thing to discover when you're reading an author for the first time, is you're always going in a little uncertain, like what is the vibe going to be? Am I going to jive with it? And I did. I really liked the writing style. I really liked the character building, the character work that was done in here. I just think it had a lot of potential to do a lot, and it felt like the plot was a little bit weak. I felt like we could have had more happening on a more accelerated timeline, some reveals maybe, some twists and turns in the story, some unexpected circumstances, and it ended up being a little bit more of a slow burn character study when I think it had a lot of really good potential for doing some things with plot. So again, still enjoyed it. It was a 3.5. I was just hoping to see a little bit more from it with such a compelling premise, but I will definitely be reading more from this author because I was pretty impressed for this to be my first encounter with one of her books. Next up is a 4-star read, and that is Linghun, which is the final 24-hour horror-a-thon read of the video. It wasn't actually the last one of the month, I don't think. No, it was not. The Vessel was. But this is the last one in the video, the 4th one to round out the month, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really, really cool. My only complaint, and the reason it wasn't a 5-star, is I wanted more, which I am almost never saying about novellas. I'm always saying like, oh, this book's too long. It could have been shorter. There should have been like 100 fewer pages, but this I could have done 100 more pages of. I could have done more world building, exploring it more, exploring the characters more, rounding out the ending a little bit more. So that was my only complaint, is I just wanted more of it, which is the best kind of complaint to have. This book has a very vague synopsis if you look for it on Goodreads, and I think that is for a very good reason, because it's kind of like a mystery unfolding to you in terms of what you're even reading. Like what kind of world you're even in, what's even happening with the characters, what secrets they're hiding. It's really a journey you have to just go on, and so I don't want to reveal too much about it. I'll just vaguely say it is a gothic tinged story. It is a grief tinged story. There's a lot about grief, and it has a speculative kind of edge to it as well, following a girl who I think is a teenager moving with her family to this new town after the loss of her brother, and she and her family are grieving with that process. They're going through different kind of processes, and there are many people around them who are also dealing with grief in very different ways. It was super unique, super cool to just explore and see the story unfold, and I definitely would check out more from this author in the future. My next 4-star was The Fury by Alex Michaelides, which was also featured in the reading blog that I did where ChatGPT recommended the books to me, so you can check that out if you want to see full thoughts, full experience with this one. This is also an arc that the publisher very kindly sent me. It comes out in January, so look out for it because it was a good time. I've previously read both The Silent Patient and The Maidens from Alex Michaelides. The Silent Patient, I believe I gave like a 3.5 star. The Maidens, I think I gave a 5-star or very close to a 5-star. And this one I ended up giving a 4-star. This is also a book that has a kind of vague synopsis, but the best thing about this book is just the way the story is told. It's not a super original story. You're following a set of characters who go off to an island, someone dies, you're trying to figure out who done it. But the way the story is told to you and the way the story unfolds is what makes it feel fun and fresh and unique, and it's just an experience to kind of put together. I do think it's interesting that this book is coming out in January because I think this would be a successful summer release just because it is like an island mystery, but maybe it's trying to get out ahead of that so it doesn't have to compete with a lot of other island mysteries that I'm sure will come out in the summer. But I don't know how many people are going to be in the mood for this in January, so if you are interested in it, I might recommend saving it for when your weather's getting a little bit warmer. I personally read this while on vacation, not a sunny destination. I was in the mountains, but I read it on a plane and I thought it was a really good read for a little trip because it reads really fast paced. It's really easy to read. You don't have to think about it too much. And it's just a really fun time. I think it's just fun to get captivated in the story, try to figure out what happened, and then it's not super memorable after that. So I think it's really good to just read while you're just trying to unwind and relax. So if it sounds like something you might be interested in, keep it on your radar because it'll be out in a couple of months. And I will say, if you enjoyed anything in the past from Alex Michaelides, I think you would enjoy this one as well. And then the final book I have to discuss is the singular 5-star book that I had this month. And it surprised me that this was a 5-star, but that is The Night She Disappeared by Lisa Jewell. I don't know if you can tell, but this copy got a little bit water damage, destroyed, because I just bought this book on a whim. I was not ever really intending on reading this book. I purchased it back in August or September. I was going to the beach with a friend for the day and I was in her town and I was like, well, I don't really have a book with me, so I'm gonna have to grab something at a Target so I can take it out to the beach to read it. And I specifically like wanted to get something I was already interested in, but there wasn't really anything that I hadn't read yet that I wanted. And I specifically wanted a paperback because I don't like to take hardcovers to the beach. Long story short, I ended up just seeing this and I was like, ugh, I don't know, I'll just pick it up. I'll just see. It's a little bit older. I think it came out in 2021, which is, you know, not old by any means, but older compared to a book that's coming out right now. She's written a couple books since this, I believe. And there was nothing about it that like particularly stood out to me to make me think I would really enjoy it. I just thought, this will be something that I can pass my time with on the beach. And I think I ended up reading none of it on the beach actually, but I did have it in my beach bag and then it did end up getting water damage. And I didn't know if I ever really intended on picking it up, but for some reason I ended up picking it up early October and I had a really good time with it. I just thought it was written super well. I thought the characters were really fully developed. I thought the mystery was compelling and the way the mystery unraveled was really compelling. I was just fully consumed in the story. I really, really enjoyed it. This especially surprised me because I have read Lisa Jewell's newest book, None of This Is True, which people seem to be overwhelmingly loving and saying it is Lisa Jewell's best book, but I just thought it was fine. Kind of like the S.A. Cosby book. And I, again, have been having that experience of like, is something wrong with me? Am I missing something? I don't know what everybody's loving about that book that I didn't love. And so I thought, well, maybe people just love Lisa Jewell. Maybe she's just not the author for me. But then I love this book and I'm like, this is Lisa Jewell's best book. I have read a handful of books from Lisa Jewell over the years. I've read The Family Upstairs. I've read the one that is about like watching you or something like a creeper person being across the street. I read Invisible Girl. I've read None of This Is True, but I've read them all over a long stretch of time. Like I've been reading Lisa Jewell for a very long time, so I don't have a very good sense of what her books are like, what she does as an author. I don't feel like I have a good grasp on that. I never really have a good expectation of what I'm getting myself into with Lisa Jewell, but this, I just loved it. I had a great time with it. It's just a small town mystery, but I just thought it came together really well. So I don't know, maybe my opinions are changing about Lisa Jewell. But that's it for all the books I read in the month of October. I'd say it was a pretty successful reading month. I was really in the mood to read this month, which always feels good when you're like, even if I'm not loving every book I'm reading, I'm loving the act of reading, which is always a good feeling. Let me know down in the comments below if you've read any of these books and what you think about them, and let me know how your reading month went in October. But that is it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye!